No confetti, no parades, just paperwork, exhaustion, and a house that finally stops humming with fear. I woke before sunrise. For the first time in months, I heard only ordinary sounds: the baby's soft breathing through the monitor, the hiss of the coffee pot, the rustle of wind against pine needles. Peace has a sound, and it's smaller than you think. Marissa came downstairs in a hoodie, 2 sizes too big, her hair tied up, her eyes still carrying the bruises of sleepless nights. She didn't speak at first. She just poured coffee, sat beside me, and said, "I dreamed of the porch light being on again." "It's off," I told her. "It's staying off." She nodded, half believing. The community needed a story to fill the silence Janice left behind. For weeks, local news recycled the same images: the gavel, the roses, the split neighborhood. But then the focus drifted, like it always does. What remained was quieter: the aftershocks. Neighbors started stopping by again, awkward but sincere. One left a basket of lemons and a note: "Sorry we didn't see sooner." Another offered to repaint our mailbox HOA approved color. I checked. Even small kindness felt enormous. Still, every kindness also reminded me of what it took to earn it. I returned to work 2 weeks later. Walking into the courthouse, the air felt heavier. Colleagues clapped my shoulder, said things like, "Glad it's over, Dan." But it wasn't over. The cases on my desk were still the same: names of people trying to survive a system that often moved slower than their pain. For the first time, I understood their impatience. One woman's file stopped me cold. Restraining order violation ignored 3 times before an arrest. Before, I might have called that procedural delay. Now, I called it what it was: failure. That afternoon, I drafted a memo proposing a new unit, one dedicated to domestic intimidation and community-level harassment. If bureaucracy could be a weapon, maybe law could be a shield again. At home, Marissa was changing in her own way. Therapy sessions twice a week. Walks around the block, at first with me, later alone. Each lap around those neat little lawns was an act of rebellion. One evening, she came back smiling, cheeks flushed. "I talked to Loretta," she said. "She wants to start a support group for women who've dealt with neighborhood bullying. HOA or otherwise." "That's a good idea," I said. She looked at me, eyes bright. "It's not just good. It's necessary," I realized then. Healing wasn't returning to who we were before. It was becoming something new after surviving what we did. Emily turned 1 that summer. We threw a small party, just family, a few brave neighbors, a lot of balloons. At one point, she toddled toward the front window, pressed her hand against the glass, and laughed at her reflection. Marissa whispered, "She's not afraid anymore." I nodded. Neither are we. Outside, the for sale sign still stood on Janice's property. Grass overgrown, mailbox dented, curtains drawn. Someone had scrawled vacant on the realtor's flyer. Sometimes justice is simply absence, the quiet where cruelty used to be. Yet the case kept echoing beyond us. A reporter reached out months later, wanting a follow-up. I agreed, on one condition: no sensationalism, no HOA horror headline. Just truth. When the piece aired, it wasn't about revenge. It was about process. How laws meant to maintain order can become weapons, and how accountability starts with ordinary people refusing to be intimidated. That night, Marissa and I sat on the couch watching the segment fade to black. The last line quoted her, "Silence protects no one." I reached for her hand. She didn't flinch this time. The following week, I spoke at a community law forum in Raleigh. Standing under fluorescent lights, I looked out at a crowd of homeowners, officers, young lawyers. I told them our story, not the sensational version, just the human one. I ended with a question I'd written in that journal months ago. If justice fails, what then? Then I answered it. Then we become it. The room was quiet, not stunned, just listening. That kind of silence I could live with. Back home, long after everyone slept, I stood on the porch. The boards still bore faint stains from that night months ago. I used to look at them with anger. Now I saw them as reminders, marks that life leaves when it keeps going. I whispered a small prayer, half gratitude, half promise. Marissa's voice came from behind me. Writing again? Yeah, just notes. For what? I smiled. For how we start over. The first thing I did after the trial wasn't to celebrate. It was to buy a new porch swing, not because we needed it, but because it had been the first thing she tried to take. I hung it on a Saturday, palms chalked with sawdust, Emily babbling on a blanket in the shade, Marissa reading the instructions just to tease me. It creaked once, then held. I sat, let the boards answer with a quiet hello, and listened to the neighborhood breathe. Peace, when it finally came, didn't announce itself. It arrived like dew. Ordinary, everywhere, unmistakable once you felt it. Marissa leaned against the frame. It's funny, she said softly. I kept thinking home was a place we lost. Maybe it's just a place we choose over and over. I'm choosing it, I said, every day. She nodded. Then let's make sure other people get to choose it too. The courthouse has a smell you learn to stop noticing. Paper, disinfectant, burnt coffee. That week, I stopped pretending not to notice anything. I asked for time on the agenda with our county supervisors. They gave me 6 minutes. I brought a single page. Not a new law, I told them, a new lens. I called it the Civic Harassment Response Protocol, CHRP, pronounced like chirp, a nod to the tiny sound that can wake any house at 3 a.m. It tied together what existed already: trespass codes, stalking statutes, child endangerment, criminal threats, and then did the simple thing we'd somehow never done: treat neighborhood intimidation and HOA misuse as part of the same spectrum as domestic intimidation, not as lawn care squabbles. Nothing changes about due process, I said, only the posture. We stop calling it a dispute when it's a pattern of coercion. We stop waiting until someone is hurt to take it seriously. A supervisor asked, gently suspicious, "And this isn't about your case?" I could have lied. I didn't. It started with my case, I said. It should end with no one else needing one. They approved a pilot, 6 months, limited funds. But it was a door, and doors are everything. At home, transformation looked smaller. Marissa stopped avoiding the front window. She started a Tuesday night group at the library. 10 chairs in a circle, a pot of tea, a rule taped on the wall. We believe each other here. The first week, only 3 women came. By week 5, they had to borrow more chairs. Laughter returned to those meetings, ragged at first, then easy. Marissa came home with a notebook full of ideas and a glow I hadn't seen since before the move. People just needed a through line, she said, a way to name it. What are you calling it? She smiled. Porch light. Because if you leave yours on, someone else will see the way home. She invited me once. I didn't sit in the circle. I stacked chairs and refilled tea and listened from the doorway while they built a language that made fear shrink just a little. Watching her lead, I understood something I'd only assumed before. Survival alone isn't the arc. Meaning is. The county's pilot program began with training. Deputies came in half skeptical, half tired. We showed them patterns, how rules can be weaponized, how concern can be a disguise, how cameras can be shields or swords depending on whose hand holds them. We gave them a checklist that started with one question no report had ever asked. Who feels smaller after this interaction, and why? It wasn't a legal element. It was a compass. One deputy raised his hand. "You're telling us to read minds." "No," I said. "I'm asking you to read context." Training ended with a scenario day. Volunteers wore HOA name tags like costumes. A young officer, the same one who had once told me it's tricky, pulled me aside after. "I got it wrong before," he said. "I won't again." It didn't sound like apology. It sounded like a decision. I wrote his name down. In Cypress Ridge, the HOA held new elections. No one wanted the gavel. Everyone wanted a voice. They rewrote their bylaws with 3 simple guardrails: transparency, limits, and appeal. Meetings required a quorum. Violations needed photographs and a second set of eyes. Complaints about children being children were summarily rejected. Loretta, once cautious, now quietly fierce, became president by reluctant vote. At the first meeting, she held up a small blue notebook someone found in the clubhouse closet and dropped it into a cardboard box labeled Archive. "We're not carrying that book forward," she said. "We're carrying each other." When we walked home under those neat streetlights, Marissa squeezed my hand. "Do you hear it?" "What?" "The sound of a neighborhood learning how to be one." I did. It sounded like normal conversation. It sounded like good evening, without a threat inside it. Emily learned the word again. She said it to swings and songs and books and sunsets. Again. 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 One evening, she toddled toward the new swing, slapped it with both palms, and looked up at me as if ordering the universe. Again. So I pushed, and she floated, and the boards creaked their old hymn, and Marissa laughed that laugh that had been boarded up for a year. The sky dimmed. The first porch lights popped on down the block. Home isn't always a place. Often it's a chorus. The reporter called back. "We're doing a follow-up on the pilot. Will you talk?" "Only if you talk to Marissa too," I said. This was never a solo story. The segment surprised me. The camera didn't linger on our house. It filmed a training room where a deputy asked a better question. It filmed a library where women poured tea and refused to disappear. It filmed a cul-de-sac where a mailbox had been repainted. Same color, new meaning. The last shot was our porch swing. Empty, moving just enough to prove there was wind. The voiceover said, "In Franklin County, they didn't pass a new law. They practiced an old one: love thy neighbor and hold them accountable when they forget." I'm not a sentimental man, but I saved that line. Months later, I stood in a different courtroom, a guest at a graduation for a diversion program I'd once criticized for being too forgiving. A teenager who had spray-painted slurs on a fence stood beside the homeowner, both of them holding paint rollers. They'd spent Saturdays repainting houses together. The judge asked if anyone had something to say. The homeowner cleared his throat. "I thought justice would be a sentence," he said. "Turns out it's a schedule." Week after week, choosing not to be the worst thing you did. I wrote that down too. When it ended, I didn't clap loudly. I just stood and let the quiet do the work. Silence can be verdict, but it can also be blessing. Not every day wrapped itself in meaning. Some were dull, some were hard. The pilot had stumbles. A case fell apart because a witness moved away. A deputy misread a conflict and had to apologize door to door. Progress is really just practice with a nicer suit on. Once, I walked past Janice's old house. The rose bushes had grown wild, throwing petals across the grass like a wedding that never happened. A new family moved in, a nurse with 2 boys who skateboarded and a father who played guitar on the stoop. I did what we all should have done the first month we lived here. I carried a pie across the street and said welcome. The father smiled at the swing, then at me. "Looks sturdy." "It is," I said. "It's been tested." He laughed like he understood more than the words. I kept the journal. 1 page per week, no skipping. I wrote small things. Emily learned purple. Marissa spoke to the city council. Her voice didn't shake. Deputy Simmons caught a case early and de-escalated it before anyone got hurt. I taped in a flyer for porch light. New meeting time, bigger room. And sometimes I wrote the hard things. A neighbor moved out because memories are heavier than furniture. A board member quit because power was easier to hold than humility. Truth belongs to the record, too. Every entry ended now with a different line than before. Justice is a habit. On the anniversary of the night everything split open, we had a picnic in the front yard. Sandwiches, a crooked cake, a candle that sputtered twice and rallied. Emily stuck her fingers straight into the frosting and declared, "Moon!" Marissa laughed. I felt something unclench that had been trying to make a fist all year. Before we went in, I stood at the curb and looked back at our house the way a stranger might. Second-hand tricycle. Chalk drawings. A swing that remembered. A front door we didn't fear. Marissa came up beside me and slipped her arm through mine. "What do you think?" "I think we survived the worst day of our lives," I said, "and somehow woke up in the best version of ourselves." She tilted her head. "Not best. Just honest." "Honest works," I said. We went inside, leaving the porch light on for no one in particular. People ask me if I ever regret not telling Janice, in the moment, who I was. I'm the district attorney, as if the title would have changed the math of what she thought she was entitled to. Sometimes I imagine it. Sometimes I wonder if it would have saved us a month, a bruise, a breath. Then I remember. It shouldn't have mattered. I was already the thing that should have kept her in check. A neighbor. If the law is a scaffold, we're the builders. We decide what goes up. We decide what gets torn down. We decide whether rules are fences or rails to hold when someone stumbles. We decide what home means. On my desk, next to a stack of indictments and a wooden rattle Emily outgrew, sits the blue notebook someone handed me the day the HOA boxed up the past. I kept only one page, blank, the last one. Some days I open it and write nothing, just press my palm there until I feel the pulse in my hand. Other days, I leave a single sentence for the next person who needs it. You're not overreacting. You're waking up. Keep going. If you've listened this far, you already know the truth. I learned the long way. Justice isn't loud. It's a porch light left on. It's a swing that keeps moving. It's the word again spoken by a child, daring the world to be safe one more time. I walk the neighborhood now without flinching. I nod to new families and old fences. I answer emails from counties that want our protocol and messages from people who found Marissa's group and women who say the tea is always too strong and somehow perfect. Cypress Ridge is exactly what it looks like again. Lawns and mailboxes and ordinary evenings, except now there's something under the paint. Call it humility, call it memory, call it the quiet agreement we all signed without paper. We don't rule each other here. We hold each other up. And if you're living in the dark right now, this is me leaving the light on. A year has passed. Sometimes it feels like 10. Sometimes like yesterday. Every evening around sunset, Emily and I sit on the porch. She insists on holding the wooden gavel the court clerk gave her, polished, harmless, symbolic. She calls it her boomstick. When she taps it against her knee, she says, "Order!" and I laugh every time. But there's a piece of truth in her play. Because order isn't control. It's safety. It's knowing that the people next to you will choose decency, even when no one's watching. Marissa's group has outgrown the library. They meet now in the community center under the same fluorescent lights where Janice once read her rules. The room smells of paper and lemon cleaner, but the air's different, alive. They talk about boundaries, empathy, courage, about the 1,000 small ways people learn to reclaim space. Sometimes I sit in the back, quietly, and just watch her. The way she leans forward when someone shares something painful. The way she listens, not with pity, but with belief. She became the thing I couldn't be in those moments. A witness who stays. One night, she caught me watching and smiled. "You thinking about court again?" "Always," I said. She walked over, took my hand and whispered, "Then think of this as appeal granted." Work looks different now, too. The pilot program became permanent. Our state's first community intervention unit focused on coercive harassment. We train other counties. I lecture at academies about how power hides in plain sight. The badge on my desk isn't just authority anymore. It's reminder. The last time I spoke at a conference, someone asked me, "If you could say one sentence to the woman who started it all, what would it be?" I didn't answer right away. The room waited. Then I said, "I hope she finds peace, but never another neighborhood to run." The audience laughed softly, but I wasn't joking. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's deciding that anger doesn't get the last word. Some evenings after Marissa's meetings end, I walk the old trail behind Cypress Ridge. It's lined with oak trees, the same ones that framed our first photograph here. There's a spot where the path opens onto a small pond. The water catches the light in pieces, the way healing does. Never all at once. I take my journal there, still the same one. The entries are shorter now. Just phrases. Emily learned to say neighbor. Porchlight Group opened a second chapter. No calls from dispatch this month. Peace held. It's strange how ordinary becomes sacred when you almost lose it. Sometimes people still ask if I ever see Janice. The answer is no. She moved out after serving her sentence, left no forwarding address. A realtor repainted her mailbox, same number, new coat of gray. The roses she planted still bloom, though. They don't care who owns the soil. Marissa clipped one last spring, pressed it between pages of her notebook, and wrote beside it, "Growth is neutral. Choose what you feed." That line ended up as the tagline for her nonprofit. I've learned that justice doesn't happen to people. It happens through them. Through the clerk who files the right form, the neighbor who speaks up, the partner who keeps believing when belief is heavy. It's slow. It's human. It leaks and cracks and still finds a way through, just like light. Sometimes, late at night, I replay that last court day in my mind, not for closure, but calibration. The sound of the gavel, the hush after. It's not triumph I hear, it's alignment. The world, for a moment, set right again. Emily's swing hangs a little crooked now. She outgrew it this spring, but she still pushes it when she walks by. I asked her once why. She said, "Because it's lonely if it stops." That's it, isn't it? Justice, love, memory, they all need motion even when no one's sitting in them. Before bed, I check the porch light. Habit now, not fear. It glows steady, quiet. Sometimes I leave it on all night, not for us, but for whoever might be driving by. Scared, unsure if anyone else understands. That light says someone does. Marissa teases me about the power bill. "You're feeding Duke Energy more than the fridge." "Worth it," I tell her. "Symbolism costs extra." She smiles, leans in the doorway, the glow cutting across her face. "You still think in closing arguments?" "Maybe. But this one's simple." When I finally sit down to write, the page feels less like a record and more like an offering. I start with the same words I began the very first entry with, only now they mean something different. This happened to us, not as a wound anymore, but as a foundation, because telling it means it doesn't own us. It means the next person who finds this story, someone sitting in their car outside a dark house, heart pounding, will know they're not imagining it. They'll know there's a way through. If you're listening now, maybe you've been there. staring at the same walls, wondering if anyone will believe you. They will. I will. Justice isn't the loudest voice in the room. It's the quiet one that refuses to leave. It's the porch light that stays on. It's a baby's laugh returning to a house that almost forgot the sound. That's what we fought for. That's what we keep. So when people ask what it's like to be a district attorney after all this, I tell them the truth. Titles fade. Law evolves. But a single act of decency that lasts longer than any verdict. And every time I close my notebook, I write the same final line. Justice is what love looks like in public.